Most people think stress comes from having too much responsibility, too much pressure, too many people depending on you. But if that were true, then someone like Tony Soprano wouldn't exist. Because Tony has power, he has money, he has control. He's the boss in The Sopranos. When he walks into a room, people stand up. When he gives an order, things happen. On paper, that kind of authority should eliminate stress. And yet, he's the most anxious person in the room. He has panic attacks, he passes out, he wakes up angry. He goes to therapy in secret because even the idea of needing help threatens the image he built his entire life around. And that's the first thing you need to understand. Stress isn't a sign that you're weak. It's often a sign that you're pretending to be stronger than you actually feel. Tony doesn't fall apart because he's incapable. He falls apart because he's carrying everything alone. He believes that being the boss means never showing doubt, never admitting fear, never letting anyone see confusion. So he builds this armor, and that armor's heavy. A lot of people do the same thing. You act confident at work even when you're overwhelmed. You act calm in relationship even when you're insecure. You act like you have a plan even when you're improvising every single day. That split between who you are and who you pretend to be, that's exhausting. And exhaustion turns into stress. Tony lives two lives. At home, he tries to be a family man. On the street, he's ruthless. But those worlds collide constantly. He can't fully relax in either one. When he's at dinner, he's thinking about threats. When he's handling business, his personal issues are boiling underneath the surface. He's never fully present. And that might be the real source of stress for most people. Not the workload, not the money, not even the problems. It's the constant mental noise. Tony is always scanning for danger, always anticipating betrayal, always calculating how he's being perceived. He wants respect. He needs control. He fears losing status more than almost anything else. Control becomes his obsession. But here's the paradox. The more he tries to control everything, the more anxious he becomes. Because control is an illusion. He can intimidate people, but he can't control what they think. He can eliminate enemies, but he can't eliminate uncertainty. He can command loyalty, but he can't guarantee it. And deep down, he knows that. That's why he's restless. That's why he's irritable. That's why even small signs of disrespect feel like threats to his entire identity. How many times have you felt stressed not because something terrible happened, but because your ego felt challenged? Someone didn't acknowledge you. Someone questioned you. Someone didn't respond the way you expected. Tony reacts aggressively to those moments. But the aggression is just fear in disguise. Fear of losing relevance. Fear of losing authority. Fear of not being enough. And when your identity is built on always being strong, any crack feels catastrophic. One of the most powerful parts of Tony's character is that he actually goes to therapy. Think about that. A man who built his entire life on dominance sits across from a therapist and talks about ducks in his pool, about childhood memories, about feeling misunderstood. He hates it at first. He resists. He deflects. But he keeps coming back. Why? Because some part of him knows that brute force can't fix internal chaos. That's a lesson most people avoid. You can work harder. You can make more money. You can go to the gym. You can project confidence. But if your nervous system is constantly on edge, none of that will create peace. Tony grew up in instability. Violence wasn't an exception. It was normal. So his body learned that the world is dangerous. His brain learned that vulnerability equals weakness. That programming doesn't disappear just because he became powerful. And that's something a lot of people relate to without even realizing it. Maybe you grew up around conflict. Maybe you had to mature early. Maybe you learned to suppress emotions because no one around you handled them well. That survival mode can help you succeed. It can make you ambitious, driven, disciplined. But it also keeps you tense. Tony is almost always in fight mode. Even when nothing is happening, his mind is preparing for impact. That constant vigilance is draining. It eats at him slowly. Stress for him isn't just about the present moment. It's accumulated years of unprocessed emotion. He doesn't just react to what's happening now. He reacts to everything that ever made him feel small, powerless, or ignored. That's why sometimes his reactions seem disproportionate. It's not about the current situation, it's about the history attached to it. And if you're honest, you've probably done the same thing. You overreact to something minor because it connects to something older, something deeper. Tony's biggest contradiction is that he despises weakness, yet he's terrified of his own vulnerability. He believes respect must be enforced, not earned. He believes dominance creates safety, but it doesn't create peace. There's a difference. You can dominate a room and still feel empty inside it. You can win arguments and still feel misunderstood. You can accumulate wealth and still wake up anxious. Tony has everything that's supposed to signal success. Big house, expensive cars, influence, but his mind rarely rests. That should make you question something. If external success doesn't automatically remove stress, then maybe stress isn't about what you have. Maybe it's about how you relate to yourself. Tony rarely allows himself to slow down without distraction. When he's alone, uncomfortable thoughts surface: regret, doubt, guilt, fear of aging, fear of losing control, fear of irrelevance. Instead of sitting with those feelings, he often numbs them with food, with distractions, with power plays. And that's another pattern people fall into. When stress builds up, you look for quick relief: scrolling, eating, drinking, working more, anything to avoid sitting still with your own thoughts. But avoidance compounds stress. It doesn't dissolve it. There are moments in the series where Tony shows genuine self-awareness. He recognizes patterns, he admits certain fears, and in those moments, you see a different version of him. Quieter, more reflective, almost lighter. Those are the rare moments when he's not performing, and that might be the most important lesson you can take from him. The performance is exhausting. The need to always appear strong, always be right, always be in control, always win. That's a full-time job on top of your actual responsibilities. What would happen if you dropped it, even temporarily? What would happen if you admitted you're overwhelmed instead of pretending you're fine? Tony's tragedy isn't that he has stress. Everyone has stress. His tragedy is that he ties his entire identity to never appearing affected by it. So when stress shows up, he fights it instead of understanding it. If you feel stressed right now, maybe the answer isn't to become tougher. Maybe it's to become more honest. Ask yourself what you're actually afraid of, not the surface problem. The deeper one. Are you afraid of failing? Of disappointing someone? Of losing status? Of being seen as incompetent? Of not living up to an image you created? Tony spends most of his life protecting an image. And protecting an image is far more stressful than being a real person, because an image can shatter. A real person can adapt. Tony's story isn't a guide on how to eliminate stress. It's a warning about what happens when you ignore its roots, when you treat every internal signal as a threat instead of information. Stress can be a messenger. It can tell you that you're carrying too much alone, that you're living out of alignment, that you're chasing validation instead of meaning, that you're trying to control the uncontrollable. Tony never fully escapes his internal war, but he gives us a mirror. He shows us that power without self-awareness creates pressure, that ego amplifies anxiety, that unresolved past experiences leak into the present, that pretending to be invincible makes you fragile. If you feel stressed, maybe you don't need to dominate your environment more. Maybe you need to examine your relationship with control, with validation, with vulnerability. Tony Soprano commands fear from others, but he can't command silence in his own mind. And that's the real battle. The lesson isn't to become like him in his ruthlessness. It's to learn from the cost of his mindset. Strength without reflection turns into tension. Control without acceptance turns into anxiety. Power without peace turns into isolation. If you're feeling overwhelmed, don't just ask how to handle the situation. Ask who you're trying to be in that situation. The unbreakable one? The perfect one? The one who never needs help? Maybe you don't need to be that person. Maybe the strongest move isn't tightening your grip. Maybe it's loosening it. Tony's life shows that you can run everything around you and still lose control of yourself. So if you feel stressed, don't just fight harder. Look inward. Because the real boss you need to understand is you.